While we can understand how microorganisms on our skin can govern the function of our skin, surprisingly, even the microorganisms found in the gut can influence how our skin behaves. This is the Transformational Life Consulting Podcast with Deepa Grandin, MD, where Christians like you get the practical support and tools you need to build your spiritual, mental, and physical well-being, and to guide you on your journey to health and wholeness based on evidence-based science and God's Word. I am your host, Dr. Deepa Grandin. In a previous podcast, I discussed the gut-brain axis and the microbiome. In today's podcast, I'm going to focus on how the microbiome influences the development of allergies. Please note that this is not medical advice. Any decision listeners make have to be discussed with their medical provider before they are implemented. As an allergy immunology doctor working in Gilbert, Arizona, early in my career, I was shocked to see the severity of allergies in patients, especially children and adolescents. Some of them had such severe food allergies that it affected their esophagus. The esophagus is that part of your digestive tract through which food reaches the stomach. Because their esophagus was affected, they required feeding tubes to be inserted directly into the stomach so the food would bypass the esophagus. That is when it dawned on me that I wasn't doing much to help my patients, and I needed to find a way to get to the root cause of why allergies seem to be increasing exponentially with each generation. So what could be causing this exponential increase in allergies? In 1989, an epidemiologist, Dr. David Strachan from the University of London, proposed a theory known as the hygiene hypothesis. Dr. Strachan observed that in families with 2 or more children, the younger siblings were less susceptible to eczema and asthma, and he proposed that this resulted from increased transmission of infections through unhygienic practices within a household. He suggested that Western culture, with increased emphasis on hygiene, did not allow the immune system to develop in a way that made it less hypersensitive to harmless environmental triggers like pollen, dust mite, animal dander, and even food proteins. In 2010, and most of you may have watched this documentary called Babies, was released. In this documentary, filmmaker Thomas Bombs crisscrosses the globe. He records the first 2 years in the lives of 4 infants and their families. Honi Jao is the youngest of 9 children and lives in Namibia, a country on the southwest coast of Africa. Baya Jargal lives in Mongolia, Hattie lives in San Francisco, and Mari lives in Tokyo, Japan. What fascinated me about this documentary was how varied the exposure to the natural environment was among these 4 children based on their country. The infants born in Namibia and Mongolia were deeply connected to the earth and farm animals. In contrast, children born in San Francisco and Tokyo were raised in a more sterile environment. Now, there are yet to be any publications looking at a head-to-head comparison of the incidence of asthma and allergies in the underdeveloped world versus the developed world. However, there are several papers that have been published on the incidence of allergies in those living in rural versus urban environment, with particular focus being given to farming communities. In 2017, the University of Chicago published a paper on the differences between Amish and Hutterite children. Now, the Amish and Hutterite are of German ancestry. However, the 2 communities have very different farming practices. While the Amish practice traditional farming, live on single-family dairy farms and use horses for field work and transportation. The Hutterites live on large industrialized communal farms. Given the difference in farming styles, profound variances were found in the level of house dust and endotoxin levels. So endotoxin is a substance found within bacteria that get released when the bacteria disintegrates. So this profound variance in house dust and endotoxin levels in turn influence the prevalence of asthma and allergies among school children. The greater the amount of house dust and endotoxin levels, especially found in the Amish homes, it seemed to protect the Amish children from developing asthma. So this type of asthma protective effect was given the nickname the farm effect. The rise in allergies such as eczema, allergic rhinitis, and asthma is a global phenomena, with westernized countries being particularly affected. Recent epidemiologic studies and experimental research suggest a strong association with the modern Western diet and lifestyle. These studies indicate that when the immune system encounters various microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea, parasites, whether it's in the body or environment, it undergoes a training process. This process teaches the immune system to tolerate harmless allergens commonly found in the environment and food, preventing the body from overreacting and causing allergies. The type of microorganisms that live within our intestinal tract is essential as it provides an early and critical source of immune stimulation. This type of immune stimulation is necessary to tolerate various foods. It is also crucial in preventing an individual from developing autoimmune diseases like Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, type 1 diabetes. All right, let's back up a little bit. What exactly are microorganisms? So microorganisms are tiny inhabitants of our world, and they are a fascinating topic. Today, I want to delve into some basic definitions that you might still need to know. So let's start with two words, microbiome and microbiota. You may have heard or read these words on social media or in a magazine. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but the two words mean very different things. The best description I've heard is that the microbiome is like the house in which the microbiota, which are trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, archaea that live in balance. So these organisms or microbiota can be considered the people that live within the house or microbiome. So early in life, exposure to a wide variety of microorganisms is ideal. Epidemiological studies have described the protective effects that while within the womb, early life exposure to an environment high in microbial diversity provides a protective benefit against the development of allergies. The human microbiome consists of about 39 trillion microbes that call our bodies whole. That's a lot. The interaction these organisms have with each other and human cells impacts human physiology, both in health and disease, and contributes to the enhancement or impairment of how the body functions from both a metabolic and immune perspective. Now, most often when I tell people, bacteria, fungi, viruses, the first thing they think about is disease, illness. However, the important thing to remember, contrary to our common beliefs, that these organisms are actually crucial for our functioning. Now, granted, there are bacteria, viruses, and fungi that do cause disease, but the majority are actually enabling us to lead healthy lives. Now, there are some instances when an organism living harmoniously within our body can later cause disease or become pathological. We call these organisms pathobionts. So an example of this would be a commonly known bacteria, E. coli, which belongs to the family Proteobacteria. So E. coli is usually found as a harmless strain in the large intestine, but it can become pathogenic in certain circumstances and cause bladder infections, diarrhea. Now, when there is an imbalance between microorganisms that promote health and those that cause disease, it creates a condition called dysbiosis. We now recognize that dysbiosis plays a significant role in causing and promoting allergic diseases, and it seems to be getting worse with each generation. So, what exactly causes this dysbiosis? Several factors have been identified. One is genetics. The second is just the condition of the human body, such as the presence of infection, inflammation. Other things like lifestyle choices, having a diet high in sugar, low fiber, consuming xenobiotics. So, xenobiotics are just chemical substances that are foreign to animal life. So, that can be drugs, pesticides, cosmetics, fragrances, pollutants. And last but not least, dysbiosis is enhanced when there is excess hygiene. Now, I did mention the hygiene hypothesis just a little while ago, but since its release, there have been other theories published that challenge this. Two such theories, one is called the old friend and the other is called biodiversity. In 2003, Graham Rook from the University College of London proposed the old friend hypothesis, and Hahatila from Helsinki, Finland in 2019 proposed the biodiversity theory. Now, both of these are similar. According to these theories, it is not the lack of infection, but rather the lack of exposure to friendly, helpful bacteria and other organisms, especially a large variety of these microorganisms in the environment that increase the risk of developing allergies. Both hypotheses have been strongly supported by consistent epidemiological evidence showing that the more microorganisms an individual is exposed to in their environment, the immune system tends to be less reactive to simple, harmless triggers like allergens found in the environment and food. This microbial exposure is especially crucial early in life. This type of exposure is typically promoted when a baby is delivered vaginally as opposed to, say, a C-section, or is born into a large family as opposed to a small nuclear family, or is raised in a farm environment as opposed to an urban or big city environment. All these environmental factors have been shown to support healthy immune system development and prevent the development of allergies and autoimmune diseases down the road. So when an individual gets exposed to a large variety of microorganisms, especially as a newborn, these microorganisms start colonizing barrier organs such as the skin, the mucous membranes. Your mucous membranes are found throughout the body, such as your digestive tract, respiratory system, reproductive system, as well as your sensory organs like your eyes, your ears, nose, tongue. The microbiota are very important for the development of the immune system. Primarily, that part of your immune system, which is known as your adaptive immune system, because it keeps evolving as the baby grows and keeps getting exposed to these different microorganisms. Now, children presenting with atopic dermatitis, which is an allergy of the skin, which is also the most diagnosed form of allergy within the first 6 months of life, they show an increased risk of developing asthma and allergic rhinitis, which is the allergies of the nose. The severity of these allergies that they can even develop later in life coincides with how severe the skin allergy is as a baby. These findings tell us that there are certain individuals that are prone to developing atopic dermatitis as babies, and they're at high risk of developing allergies to multiple things as they keep growing older. Our immune system plays a vital role in differentiating dangerous antigens versus self antigens, or what we say antigens belonging to the individual. So, what are antigens? Antigens are usually proteins or sugar found outside the cell wall, or organisms like bacteria and viruses. So, for your immune system to successfully make accurate assessments, it relies on a myriad of stimuli provided by organisms found in the environment as well as on the person. When this system of checks and balances fails, that is when the individual starts developing autoimmune and allergic diseases. In order to further understand this process, let me take you a little bit deeper into understanding atopic dermatitis. Atopic dermatitis is also sometimes called atopic eczema. As I explained earlier, there is an allergic problem with the skin, which mostly develops in childhood. And this type of skin condition, you see itchy, dry, inflamed spots on the skin. Microorganisms that live on the skin, which is also known as your skin microbiome, plays a critical role in developing the skin allergy or atopic dermatitis. The more diverse and varied the microorganisms are that live on your skin, the less likely the individual is to get a severe form of allergy. For instance, when we look at the type of bacteria found in individuals who have severe atopic dermatitis, we find they have an increased abundance of bacteria that belong to the class Firmicutes. So examples of those bacteria will be the Gemella species, Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermis, and they have a reduced abundance of the phylum or class Actinobacteria. And examples of those would be Dermacoccus and Proteobacteria. Individuals who carry bacteria like Streptococcus, Corynebacterium, Cutibacterium, they tend to have atopic dermatitis. So there are many, many reasons and factors that contribute to the development of atopic dermatitis. And unfortunately, individuals who have atopic dermatitis, especially when they're very young, it increases their risk of developing food allergies. So the younger the child is when they develop the atopic dermatitis, higher the risk for food allergies, particularly peanuts, cow's milk, and hen's egg allergy. Also, when we look at the skin of individuals who have atopic dermatitis, they're quite different than people who don't. For instance, a normal skin, they have a very acidic pH, which is roughly around 4.7 to 5.75, while those with eczema or atopic dermatitis, they have a more neutral pH, which is closer to 7. The acidity of normal skin contributes to a strong barrier that prevents unhealthy bacteria from multiplying and invading the skin, which is what causes the itchy, inflamed skin. Higher pH in those with eczema makes the skin barrier function weaker. Also, the fat in the skin in these individuals is less, which again makes the barrier quite frail. So higher pH influences the type of bacteria found on the skin. A paper published by Alison Bird from the National Institute of Health showed that those with more severe forms of eczema were found to have bacteria Staphylococcus aureus. In contrast, those who did not have as severe a disease, they had more Staphylococcus epidermidis. Also, the type of strain of Staphylococcus aureus isolated from patients with atopic dermatitis belonged to the CC1 strains. In contrast, those with normal, healthy skin had something called the CC30 strain of Staphylococcus aureus. So as you can see, it's a very complex process. It's not just about the bacteria, but also the strain. Now, the Staph aureus itself creates something called superantigens. These superantigens cause the individual's immune system to increase cells like the T cells and other proteins called pro-inflammatory lipoproteins, all of which increases the inflammation in the skin, causing excessive itching, and the itching causes a rash, and then you just have this vicious cycle that keeps going on and on. Now, while we can understand how microorganisms on our skin can govern the function of our skin, Surprisingly, even the microorganisms found in the gut can influence how our skin behaves. For instance, sufferers of severe eczema have low diversity or variability in the type of microorganisms found in the gut. So we call this again dysbiosis. Individuals who have eczema have been found to harbor many bacteria from the species or class of Firmicutes, especially bacteria such as Clostridium difficile, Coprobacillus, Enterococcus, Peptinophilus, and they have a reduced abundance of protective bacteria such as the Proteobacteria, Bacteroidetes, in the intestine. The bacterial metabolites, which are produced by the protective gut microbes, are actually very important when it comes to preventing the development of atopic dermatitis. There was a study known as the koala birth study cohort, which was led by Ishka Kumelang from Maastricht University in the Netherlands. And they found an increased risk for the development of eczema in 1-month-old babies who were colonized with Clostridium difficile. All right, now I'm going to shift our focus onto food allergies. We all have seen food allergies is a condition that has significantly increased in prevalence worldwide. And now we have around 8% of children and 5% of adults globally that have diagnosed food allergies. The 8 most common food allergens in young children are cow's milk, egg, peanut, wheat, soy, tree nuts, fish, and shellfish. In order to understand why food allergies happen, we first need to understand a phenomena called oral tolerance. Now, oral tolerance is an active process by which the immune system learns to ignore food-derived foreign proteins, meaning just the proteins that you find in your food that's foreign to your body. And, when it enters your gut, your body, your immune system learns to recognize it as harmless. Now, bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate promotes this process of developing oral immune tolerance because they themselves promote anti-inflammatory effects within the gut. Now, when this oral tolerance is lost, every time an individual is exposed to a harmless food allergen, there is like this gush of immune response, which is what we call food allergies. For instance, the Canadian Health Infant Longitudinal Development Study, also known as childbirth cohort, indicated that at a reduced variability of gut microorganisms in a child 3 to 6 months of age, they had a high risk of developing food sensitization and allergies at 12 months of age. So also these infants were found to have an increased abundance of harmful bacteria like Enterobacteriaceae and a reduced number of protective bacteria, which is your Bacteroideaceae and Ruminococciaceae. Another essential protein which is important to know about is immunoglobulin A or IgA that babies get through breast milk. This also helps in creating oral tolerance. All right, now let's shift our focus to asthma. What is it? Now, most of us know that asthma is a chronic lung disease and it can affect anybody at any age. However, it's important to notice that asthma can be categorized based on its cause. One form is known as the allergic type of asthma, or we call it atopic asthma. And this type tends to surface later in childhood or in early teenage years. It's often a result of a genetic predisposition to allergies. And most often, these individuals react to triggers like dust mites, grass pollen, animal dander. And they tend to have this persist into adulthood. On the other hand, there is something known as non-allergic type of asthma or non-atopic asthma. This type typically develops very early in life, like 2 to 3 years of age, and most often it goes away around 13 years of age. And the reason we need to distinguish these characteristics is it helps us to understand and manage the type of asthma better. Now, what commonly associates with these allergic types of asthma is another condition called allergic rhinitis. Sometimes it's also known as hay fever. And here the individual has like a stuffy nose, sneezing, runny nose. And just like with asthma, the triggers are usually things like pollen, dust mites, animal dander. And, so again, depending on the trigger, it can either be all year round or it can be seasonal. A recent analysis of the microbial composition in the mucosal airways of children with asthma or allergic rhinitis, again, there was a reduction in the protective microbes. It was associated with something like I've been explaining this whole time called microbial dysbiosis. When we look at the farm effect, and look at it a little bit deeper, there was a paper published by Martin Schuges from Ghent, Belgium, and he looked into why are children born in farms less likely to have asthma and allergies. And he reported a specific type of enzyme called the ubiquitin modifying enzyme A20. And this is found in the lungs of children living in farm environments, and it's found to protect them from developing asthma. On the other hand, children growing up in large cities lack this enzyme and are found to be at higher risk of developing asthma. In conclusion, I hope I have convinced you about the importance of exposure to as many microorganisms as possible. The first few days after birth represents a critical window in a baby's life when their immune system develops. We must be intentional in ensuring babies get a strong start in life. Always opt for vaginal birth rather than C-section when possible. Breastfeeding rather than formula feeding when possible. Having children interact with many family members, including pets when possible. And avoiding antibiotic exposure, especially during the first year of life. For older children and adults, eat a lot of fermented foods, raw fruits and vegetables. When we take intentional steps, we protect ourselves as well as the future generation and help together to create a robust immune system. We need to find ways to rebuild connections with our tiny friends in the microbiome world.